Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Business Vision Business Health Workshop number 10. Hope you're all well. Today's subject is your personal budget, which is a slight deviation from normal. So basically what we normally touch on is business methods of how to make money, how to save tax, and how to increase cash flow. Today's going to concentrate on the purpose of running a business, which is to basically produce personal wealth and how you can then control personal wealth using personal budgets. So we use GoToWebinar. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, there is a little icon on the orange arrow that will bring in the dashboard features or hide it, whichever way you want to go. And you can then basically expand or collapse that. You'll automatically be muted. There is a handout that we would normally give out, but it's an Excel spreadsheet and it's quite large, so it doesn't actually work with GoToWebinar. So we will keep a note of the attendees and send you out a copy of that fairly soon after the webinar's ended. If you're listening to this as a recording, which many of you do later on, then obviously you won't be getting that. So you'll need to actually email me, which is mark, M-A-R-C, at marklawson.co.uk, and just ask for the personal budget spreadsheet, and we'll gladly send you a free copy of that as well. So if you have any questions at the end of the session, we'll go through the normal Q&A if we have time. So if you've got any questions, type them in and we'll try and get around to those at the end. If we don't have time or we have too many questions, then I'll come back to you individually again after the webinar. Okay, so what have we got on today? So firstly, we'll just go through a brief introduction about what we're going to be looking at, although I think the subject is fairly self-explanatory. Then we'll go into a brief understanding of personal budgets, what that means, and what personal budgeting entails. We'll then just go through the benefits, because we need to understand what we're going to get out of this in order to do it. So knowing what the benefits are, some of them will be quite obvious, but there are a few unexpected side benefits that we'll touch on. We'll then go through the key elements, the components of a personal budget, and then we'll actually go through and complete one, or start completing one, using the template that we're giving you. You can obviously use your own template or own methods, but the Excel template's been thought through carefully by us. It's all automated and it does the job. So that will be free to you. You can gladly go away and use that with our compliments. And then we'll go through how to create an accountability structure. So a bit like dieting and various other things, giving up smoking, it's important to have accountability where people will hold you accountable to your budgets. Otherwise it becomes a useless exercise. So we'll go through how to do that. Then we'll go through the next steps, what you need to do immediately after the webinar and how we can help you. And then, as I say, we'll go through any Q&As that we may have, time permitting. So, thought of the day, effectively, as I say, we always go through a little thought of the day. And today's is, it's critical that kids start to learn the value of money, short-term and long-term savings and budgeting at an early age. And different children, as they grow up, I think, have different perspectives, often based on what their parents and grandparents' thoughts and processes are. But I think these are issues that are not taught at school. So budgeting and the idea of money is not something that is trained on anybody. It's obviously crucial going through life in terms of mortgages, how to spend your income, and given that the level of debt certainly in our society is huge, you know, possibly how to avoid that, or at least how to use it effectively and for the purpose it's intended. And I think the pandemic and various other social issues have highlighted these areas in recent years. So as accountants, we obviously tend to deal with business forecasts and business budgets a lot more. And this is just an extension, but it's an important extension, because the whole point of being in business is to actually generate personal money. And there's no point doing that if you then don't budget that as well. So the aim of a business is not in itself to make the business money, it's to make the owners money. That's the whole point we go into it. And then this is really about how do we then budget the money that we're getting? So it will have a slight business edge to it, but there's absolutely no reason why most of today's webinar can't be used by non-business people. So your children, your parents can all use this and the free spreadsheet without any reference to running a business whatsoever. But because we are accountants, and I suspect the people listening are mostly in business, then we will put a few businessy bits in there at the same time. So understanding, one of the questions I get asked quite a bit when we go through figures at the end of the year or pre-year end planning from business owners is, if that's my profit, where is it? So we show them a profit figure or their bookkeeping system does, and they immediately go, that can't be right. If I've made that much, where is it? Well, the answer is, there are things that happen after you've made your profit. It's a bit like asking, if my salary is £40,000 a year, where is it? Well, there will be things it's spent on, and you need to know what you're spending it on and budget for what's left. Second question I get asked is, how can the tax bill be that high if I have no money? Well, the reality is tax in all areas is not based on affordability. It might be means tested, but it doesn't guarantee that you'll have the money to pay it, especially in business where it's paid later. At least if you're in a job, they'll deduct the pay before they give you your salary, so you've got no way of avoiding that. But there's no guarantee that if you have a tax bill that you have the money to pay it. So budgeting for tax in businesses is very important. And the relevant question, the third question I get asked is, when I show them how much money they've taken out of the business and the impact that has on the business, they go, that can't be right, that looks too high. I don't live off that much money, I only take this much out. But then we would go through the individual elements and they can see that there are the occasional extra bits getting taken out. So there might be a holiday that they forgot about, or a luxury purchase that they forgot about, as well as the regular monies. Some businesses don't have regular monies, they just take it as and when it's there. And I think from a business point of view, my recommendation is that you fix an amount that comes out of the business weekly or monthly, depending on how you prefer it, that is the set budget. How you set that is entirely up to you, but we can obviously give guidance on what the business can afford, but you set that in stone and you then do a direct debit or standing order as if it was a wage from your business to your personal account, and then you budget your personal account in the way we're going to show you today. And that way, you know, when you've basically gone above your total budget, what we're going to go through today will tell you where you went over, but at least that way, when you then have to go back to the business and dip in again, you know that you've exceeded your planned budget, which means the business is now paying out more money than it expected to, which can be an issue. So we'll go through all of that. So drawings can be too high, and I'd recommend setting a fixed figure. So you can do that, and I think ideally trying to treat it like a salary or some sort of regular income would make perfect sense. I think the other problem with running a business is you do get what's called the anchoring effect, where you see big figures. You see the bank balance growing to a big figure. You see your sales are a big figure, but the actual money you get left to spend is relatively small. And that's not what you generally see. So sometimes people look at the bank account and go, oh, look, I've got £200,000 in there, let's have a holiday. But there's no business budget to tell them that, looming around the corner is the VAT bill, the tax bill, and maybe, the suppliers haven't been paid quite as quickly. So that needs to be brought down. So I think the problem with being in a business is, unlike getting a salary, where the salary is what you've got available to spend, a business looks bigger, but actually the amount you get can be quite small in comparison to, let's say, the sales figure or even the bank balance. So personal budget is a finance plan that allocates future personal income towards expenses, savings and debt repayment. That sounds fairly obvious. First thing to note, there's three distinctions. Firstly, it's a personal budget, not business, which I say we've already touched on. So we know this is to do with your private income once it comes from the business and what you're doing. Secondly, exactly like a business budget, this is not something that you create and then put in a bottom drawer and leave it until you decide to do another one next year. It's an actionable plan. It's something that will guide you through your personal life in the same way a business budget will guide you through your business life. Otherwise, it's a bit like setting out somewhere in a car and going, we're going to go from A to B, but never actually looking at where we are, never looking outside to see whether we're where we thought we were going to be, and never dealing with those issues that might crop up, such as roadworks or diversions that obviously may take us temporarily away from our plan. We need to work out how to get back on it. So it's a living, breathing plan that needs to be looked at on a regular basis. And lastly, I'd recommend it's for a 12-month period, broken down into months, unless there's a particular reason why you need it weekly. Most people's budgets tend to be monthly these days, standing orders and payments and so on are monthly. And it allocates against your future income, personal expenses, savings, so money put aside for savings, and reduction of personal debt and creation of investments. So it lays out exactly how you're going to spend and save money. So benefits, what are they? Fairly straightforward. I think it gives you control of your personal money. I think it's fair to say that many people are not in control of personal money. It gets spent and then you run out before you get to the end of the month and then have to draw down more if you're in business. If you're a salary, then you borrow. So it gives you control over day-to-day life. It keeps you focused on money goals, which are important. We're not recommending that you spend your whole life thinking about money, but it is important in the scheme of things. It's what allows you to do the pleasurable things in life. So we need to focus on that. It creates awareness of where the money goes. Certainly most people wouldn't be able to tell you from month to month what they've spent the money on without a personal budget, and where it goes can sometimes be quite surprising and scary for those people. It builds better money habits. I think that's quite important for any person that is in receipt of income, so that you can actually build up better habits, whether that's creating some savings for future or paying your debt back off better. Manages debt levels. As a side issue, we did a live seminar many years ago, which was about how to reduce your personal debt. I'm not going to touch on that in great detail today, but that was a whole session on how to actually repay your debt down, which debt to repay first, how to allocate money, and how quickly you can repay debt. And what we proved with all the attendees, and I think there was about 50 there, is that we took a sample of people who were prepared to put their figures up, and we proved that by creating a very small amount of spare money, which we can easily do with this personal budget, that debt, whatever it could be, there was no debt there bigger than couldn't be reduced to nil within 7 years. It required the appropriate actions. So some of those appropriate actions wouldn't necessarily be deemed to be enormously life enhancing, but they are very sensible. And the reality is, you can't just spend money on whatever you like and still be sensible, by and large, not unless you've got huge amounts of money. So debt levels we'll look at. And then the reverse of that is it will help you achieve your wealth goals, because increasingly people are living longer once they get to retirement. They're retiring early. Certainly youngsters these days are going through what they called the big resignation, where they're reassessing their lives on the back of living through 3 years of COVID and probably being in lockdown. So wealth goals are important, ongoing, but also crucially for retirement. Early warning systems, so it will highlight where things might not be going according to plan, so you can actually do something about it rather than waiting for that to become a major problem. It becomes a communication tool, so it allows you to communicate with better half spouse, children, parents, whatever it might be, and that in turn may relieve some argumentative areas that might crop up with money. Provides you with more money if you stick to the plan, and it ultimately provides a better life so that you can enjoy things rather than having to worry about the money side of it, because you know it's under control. So hopefully that gives you some ideas of the benefits of what we're going to talk about today. It then makes sense to talk about why people don't do it, and I think even less than business budgets. I think probably about 1 in 40, 1 in 50 business clients do proper business budgets. I would suspect personal budgets are even less than that, and these are some of the reasons why, and we'll try and give you some reasons why they shouldn't make you avoid personal budgeting. So it's extra work to set up and monitor. Yes, it is, but it's very easy to do. It's not a particularly time-consuming process. I'll go through and start one off a bit later in the session, and you'll see that this is probably about an hour or two. Certainly it's about an hour, half an hour to complete, but maybe another hour for conversations on what those budgets should be. So that I don't think is particularly true. You hear the word budgets and then immediately think, oh, I'm going to be living on bread and water for the rest of my life. It's not necessarily about reducing what you spend. It's just about controlling it. So it's a spending plan rather than necessarily a saving plan. Budget doesn't mean cost cutting necessarily. The plan may indicate you do need to do some cost cutting, but I say that will depend on what the figures are. Don't know how to prepare one, so many people don't know how to do personal budgets. There are things online, but as I say, we'll give you what I think is a comprehensive tool to work with after this session. There's fear of putting the subject of money on the table. Well, that's certainly true in some cases. It can be a cause of conflict in the household, but effectively burying your head in the sand about it, I think, just exacerbates the problem rather than helps deal with it. So like any areas of contention in families, better to get those out in the open and discuss them properly and accurately rather than let things fester. Fear of what they'll find, well, again, that's also true, but again, that's avoiding what you're going to find out is a bit like burying your head in the sand. It can be scary at first, but I think once you get into the habit of doing it, it becomes very straightforward. Pride, I don't need one. Well, that may be the case, but I would suspect it's very hard not to have one and then to get everything lined up and doing what it's supposed to do. So again, it's a bit of a preconceived notion that you don't need a personal budget. And then obviously laziness. Hopefully what we go through today will make all of those things become less of an issue to avoid doing it. But as with all things, especially the ones we talk about in these webinars, there is going to need to be some action taken. So you can't just do nothing at the end of today and expect things to change. There has to be some input from yourselves, and hopefully you'll see that that input doesn't need to be too huge in the scheme of things. So what are the components? None of these will come as a particularly big shock, and they're all set up in the Excel spreadsheet we'll talk about. So you would start by just noting down what your spendable income is going to be. So that could be salary, or in the case of business owners, dividends and salary from businesses. You may have a pension, you may have rental income, all of that. You estimate as best you can and enter that initially, because that's going to be the money that you're getting that you can then do what you need to do with. And I say, if you're in business, then I would firstly determine what the business can afford as a personal budget, as well as what you would like. Hopefully those two things match up, but if they don't, then there may be work to do on the business. And we've discussed that side of things in many other webinars. Then you put your general housing expenses in categories. So we've got the categories in there. So these are the obvious ones: housing, insurance, cars, food on the table, kids, maybe student fees, etc., medical, lifestyle, and debt repayment if you have debt. So all of those are entered, and that will give you a figure that represents your net spendable income, or not on the case, maybe. And then you do monthly monitoring. So every month you'll look at this and go, is our spending and income on track? Did what we think was going to happen actually happen? Exactly the same as with business budgets. Do we need some sort of behavioural change or financial change? So again, if you're in business and you're not getting enough money coming from the business, can we change the business in such a way to get more income out without jeopardising the business, etc., etc.? Or are we actually looking at, for the first time ever, our cappuccino habit, where we're basically spending £30 a week each on coffee shops, and can that be phased back a little bit to save us a substantial amount of money per year? And then reset the budget if necessary. If the amendments are big enough, then you may want to revisit the budget and just tweak some of the figures. Maybe you've had a pay rise, maybe you've got some extra sources of expenses that you didn't think you were going to get, and just redo it rather than actually let it become obsolete, in which case you'll never look at it again. And it may be that, as I say, your goals, may not give you sufficient personal cash, and that clearly needs to be looked at to try and resolve that. Otherwise, you're going to be getting into debt, and we all know but forget when we're taking on debt that that has to be repaid at some point, which obviously then represents more outgoings in your budget. So it can become a self-defeating cycle. So how do we complete one? Well, I'll just take you through now the personal budget. So if you bear with me, I'll just flick over to the personal budget just to give you a flavour. But that's the sort of information you can see there on the screen. So it will highlight your annual income, it will highlight your annual expenses and all the categories that you've put them into, and it will show you your annual surplus and month-on-month figures. So let me just flick over to that. Yeah, so that's the spreadsheet that you'll get. And I say, you'll see there that it's fairly straightforward. It's got income laid out with all the headings that you think you might have. And you've got two ways of entering that. You can put in a figure monthly. So if your business drawings are £2,500, if you enter that, that will fill out every month, or you can go into each month and enter individual figures. So I'll just complete a couple of lines on that. And I say, you may have some other sources of income as well, so we'll put those in. But I say you only have to put it in the amount column, and that will automatically populate all the months. The spreadsheet has a date at the top, which I didn't show you, but that will indicate when you're going to start from. So I've put in 31st of March 23, so I'm starting in April 22 with my figures. The same thing with household expenses. So we would put in details of the mortgage, rates, and so on. So simple as that, and that will gradually just populate all the areas within the plan. You can add in other ones, but there is basically a column that says other in there as well. So we can go through that and complete that for the whole period. So food we can put in. I won't go through all of this because it's not overly exciting, and I think you get the gist of things by now, and so on. So that basically creates the plan. So you'll have a complete total of all the monies going out. We've come up with all the headings that we can think of that you might need, but if in doubt, just put it into the other bit. And then the key bit is you can monitor that on a monthly basis. So as soon as you put in, so let's say the business drawings were £3,500, as soon as you put in the actual figures, the spreadsheet under the actual performance will then populate all the figures for that month. So we've now brought all the budget figures forward from the first sheet I showed you, and we can then compare, particularly with regard to the expenditure figures, we can start to put in what actually left our bank account, so we can sort of enter the real figures. And then that allows us to do a monitor, because if we've got less money at the end of the month than we thought we had, then clearly income's going to be too low. Sorry, Excel's gone funny. It's going to be too low or not. And you can start to then work out where that's happening. So that's the personal budget, and I say monitoring it monthly will allow you to actually see, if you enter the real figures, where you've gone over on your costs, or maybe where you've gone under on the income, and that will tell you how you're going to work through for the rest of the year. And as I say, if you over budget, then you may need some behavioural changes, or you may need to engineer some extra income, and so on. It may be that you've put in, let's say, 10% of your earnings to go into savings. It may be you need to downgrade that, or it may be you've got the capacity to increase it. So that spreadsheet, as I say, is available free of charge. I know mine just went a bit odd, but I think it's having the PowerPoint open at the same time. But that's available to you, and we'll get people attending the live webinar a copy of that immediately. If you're on the recording, then email me, mark@marklawson.co.uk, and we'll gladly send you a free copy of that spreadsheet. Okay, so we've got that budget working, and now we want to basically go into what we call an accountability stage. So we need to let people know that we're doing that, so that you can monitor everything, and so that it will be a valuable experience for you. So it's key to keep a track on spending on a monthly basis. And I think to do that, you would involve other people, especially if you're a couple. I would strongly recommend you involve both of you in this process and you keep each other accountable. Now, I know that may be a source for discussion where one person goes, oh, you're spending this much on golf and going out all the time for golf, and the other person goes, well, you're spending a load of money going out for coffee mornings or whatever it might be. But those things need to be discussed and sorted out as part of the accountability stage, in my view. Otherwise, they'll just become problems when money starts to not be there. So accountability framework, don't just set up the plan and forget it. Setting up the plan is just the first step. Track your spending, so see where the money's going, review and reset that plan monthly. If needed, I say it may not be needed, hopefully you'll be roughly on track and that will just give you some comfort, but make sure it's still a live plan and that it works for you. And then if needed, get independent accountability. And we go through at the end some ways that we may be able to help you with that, and also bring fun and light into the process. Again, like any monitoring and tracking at home, it makes sense, especially when you're doing it with kids, for example, it makes sense to make that into a bit more of a game. So you might have rewards at the end, or, something on the wall to illustrate how well it's going, something like that. Just make it a bit more than a dull money spending process or budgeting process that might be a bit dry. Okay, so next steps, as I say, this is a fairly short session today. So normally we would expect these sessions to be certainly 45 minutes, but this is a quick, easy process. And I would suggest that your next steps are to focus on the benefits so that you actually do get this going, so you can understand what you're going to gain from it. Then set an annual personal budget and then break it down into its component parts on the spreadsheet. Often that will be equal amounts per month, but there may be reasons such as holidays, for example, where it won't be. And focus on what you can control. Clearly, if you're in a job and you're on a salary, then you may have very little control over that, but you have got control over the outgoings. If you're in business, then you can, to a large extent, control the income, but you may not have complete control over how the business generates money. But whatever you can, just concentrate on what you can control. There's no point worrying about the things that are beyond your control. And then get support from us if you need it, or if you have any questions, come to us and we can certainly go through this in more detail. As I said at the beginning, this is an area where business owners and just general individuals don't do this on a month-to-month basis. And as I say, I think the benefits can be huge if you do. Okay, how can we help? Well, basically, personal budget review. So we can actually go through and complete all this work with whoever's going to be making those spending decisions. So often, usually a couple, it doesn't have to be. So we can go through that. That's £350. And that's, I say, comprehensively filling out that spreadsheet and giving you all the things to work through and showing how you can get and enter the monthly figures. Again, one of the problems can be with this is just getting the monthly figures. You can these days export pretty much every online banking or credit card into Excel, so you can easily manipulate that. If you really wanted to get thorough about it, you could set up some sort of online software. There are many that do personals. You could even use Xero for personal purposes. Just bring the bank feeds in and it will all be there automatically for you. So there are loads of ways of getting that monthly data quickly and accurately, but worst scenario, you just tot it up on a calculator. We can then do both the personal budget review and initial coaching sessions. So that often will be the case where there is a lack of money and we need to work out how we're going to restructure debt, and maybe go back to the business and restructure that to see whether it can generate more money, and so on. The personal budget template we've just gone through, that's completely free. So I say you can have that with our compliments. And we also do a complimentary business meeting. So if you are in business and this is something else that you want to add on to the things you're doing, we can run a complimentary business meeting to discuss any subject whatsoever, usually for about 60 to 90 minutes. So that could be, how do we get more sales? Why aren't we making more profit? How do we get our tax down? gladly do that. We do that with existing clients once a year. So if you want that, just again, email me or any of the team and we'll set that up for you and get that moving. So any questions? Just quickly go through and see if anybody's put any questions in the panel. There's just one there, which is a good question. How can we budget for things like repairs when they become an exceptional item? We don't know what the costs are going to be. I think with all budgets, you're estimating where you think it's going to be, and then, as I say, monitoring monthly. So with repairs, that will be an unknown quantity, and I would think of it a bit like an insurance company does, which is they work out roughly what history tells us should be the budget, and then they add a bit on. So insurance companies will charge you more for insuring repairs than it's going to cost them to pay out for them. Obviously, that's how they make their money. So I'd look at your history, maybe add into that your personal knowledge of what's going wrong or about to go wrong, and build up a budget. If in doubt, go over on the basis that that money will be there. And if you've over budgeted, then you'll have some spare money and you can either roll that into next year to help with next year's repairs, or you can use it for something a bit more pleasurable. So I'd break it down, but could probably go over the figure you think you're going to need. Obviously, there will be occasions where, let's say you start this budget and you put in £3,000 repairs and then something drastic happens that's not insured and it's going to cost you £5,000. Well, you will be over budget. Unless you can claw that money back from other areas in your budget, that probably is going to need some sort of finance, and then you can build the cost of the finance into your budget and see how that's going to work through. So I think we can't guarantee accurate predictions of the future. If we could do that, we'd all make a load of money, but we can make best guesses. And I think on those areas where we know sometimes it can be an unknown quantity, I would tend to be pessimistic and go over rather than assume the best, in which case, you know, the best that can happen is you're right and everything's fine, but the worst that can happen is things happen and there are costs that you hadn't predicted, and that's going to mess up with your budgets a little bit. So go over if you can, if the budget allows you to, and then deal with it as and when your monthly monitoring tells you that that hasn't worked out quite to plan. Okay, thanks for that question. That was much appreciated. That's the only one I've had, but if anybody's got other questions and they just didn't want to put it in there to have it answered live, then by all means just send me an email and I'll gladly go through that. Okay, parting thoughts before we go is a budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. So I think that's an apt comment to leave today's session on. So it only remains to me to thank you for attending today. As always, much appreciated. There'll be another webinar in May and we'll send you details of that. Still thinking about the subject matter for that at the moment. If there are subjects that you'd want me to cover, then by all means email me those as well, and we'll try and see if there's anything there with a common theme. But next month's one will be more about business again, but hopefully today you found the personal budget one of use, and more importantly, I hope you do actually run with that and start getting your personal budgets done. If you do, you know, and you're happy to send me a copy, it'd be interesting to see what you've all come up with. So thank you for that, and hopefully see you all in May. Thank you.